The helicopter blades whipped against the freezing air as we touched down. I grabbed my duffel bag and stepped onto the landing pad, and the cold hit me like a punch to the chest. Even through my heavy military-issue coat, it felt like someone had dumped ice water down my spine. Alaska in January, not exactly a dream assignment. Station Echo 7 looked smaller than I'd expected. 3 squat buildings huddled together against the vast white landscape, surrounded by dense pine forest that stretched as far as I could see. The mountains loomed in the distance, partially hidden by low clouds. Everything was white and gray and dark green. I'd been told this was a research outpost. Didn't look like much research happened here. A stocky older man trudged through the snow toward me. He wore standard military cold weather gear with commander insignia. Had to be Lincoln Wilkins, the CO I'd been told to report to. "Barton," he called over the dying rotor noise. "Yes, sir," I saluted. "Specialist Brandon Barton reporting for duty." He returned the salute with a quick, practiced motion. "At ease. Get your gear and follow me." I grabbed my bags and hurried after him. The helicopter lifted off behind us, and I watched it disappear into the gray sky. There went my ride. I was officially stuck here now. Wilkins led me to the largest of the 3 buildings. The wind drove tiny ice particles against my face, and I ducked my head as we walked. Inside, the temperature wasn't much better, but at least we were out of the wind. The hallway smelled like old coffee and industrial cleaner. "You got your transfer papers?" Wilkins asked, not bothering with small talk. I pulled the folder from my inside pocket and handed it over. "Yes, sir." He glanced at them briefly. "Communications specialist. Good. Our last one left 3 weeks ago. Equipment's been acting up." "What kind of research is conducted here, sir?" I asked. Wilkins looked at me for a long moment, his gray eyes giving nothing away. "Need to know," he said finally. "And right now, you don't need to know." He led me to a small office with a metal desk and 2 chairs. The room was bare except for a map of the area pinned to one wall. No personal touches, no photos, nothing to suggest anyone actually worked here. "Sit," he said. I sat. Instead of the standard briefing I was expecting, Wilkins pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and slid it across the desk. "These are the station rules. Memorize them." I picked up the paper, expecting the usual military protocols, chain of command, emergency procedures, duty rotations. What I found instead made my stomach tighten. The paper contained a handwritten list. 1. Remain indoors between 2200 and 600 hours, no exceptions. 2. Do not enter the forest during full moons. 3. Do not accept gifts from anyone you don't recognize. 4. Limit outdoor activity to necessary operations only. 5. If you hear whispers when alone, shoot first. Do not attempt communication. 6. Report any dreams about the mountain immediately. 7. If electronics malfunction, return to main building at once. 8. Never follow animal tracks that lead away from the station. 9. If you see lights in the forest at night, lock your door and stay quiet. 10. Count your fingers twice before entering any building. I read the list twice, waiting for Wilkins to crack a smile, tell me it was some kind of initiation joke they played on the new guys, but his expression remained serious. "Sir, I don't understand. What is this?" "Those are the rules for surviving at Station Echo 7, he said matter-of-factly. "Follow them, and you might make it to the end of your 6-month rotation." A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature ran through me. "Surviving, sir? I was told this was a research station." "It is." He didn't elaborate. I looked at the list again. Rule number 5 stuck out like a sore thumb. Shoot first? At what? And rule 10, count my fingers? What the hell kind of place was this? "Sir, with all due respect, I need more information. What exactly are we researching here? And why would I need to shoot at..." Whispers. Wilkins leaned forward, placing both hands flat on the desk. "You were assigned here because your file says you follow orders without asking too many questions, Barton. I suggest you start doing that now." I wanted to argue, to demand real answers, but something in his eyes stopped me. There was a weariness there, maybe even fear. "The communications equipment is in Building 2, he continued, standing up. "You'll report there at 600 tomorrow. Your quarters are in Building 3, Room 12. The mess hall is down the hall. Dinner's at 1800. Any questions?" I had about 100 questions, but I could tell I wasn't going to get answers to any of them. "No, sir." "Good. Dismissed. Just like that, my briefing was over. No explanation of what I'd be communicating or with whom. No clarification on the bizarre list of rules. Nothing. I stepped back out into the cold, clutching my duffel and the paper with the rules. The helicopter was long gone now, just the disturbed snow on the landing pad showing where it had been. I stood there for a moment, looking at the forest that surrounded the station. The trees seemed darker somehow, more ominous than they had when I arrived. Building 3 wasn't hard to find. It was the smallest of the structures, set slightly apart from the others. Inside, a narrow hallway led to a series of doors. Mine was at the end. Room 12. The quarters were sparse. A single bed with gray blankets, a small desk, a metal locker, and a window that faced the forest. The walls were bare except for a basic emergency evacuation plan. A door in the corner led to a tiny bathroom with a shower stall. I set my bag down and sat on the bed. It creaked under my weight. The window had heavy blackout curtains, currently open to show the view of endless pine trees. The forest came right up to the edge of the cleared area around the station, maybe 50 yards from my window. I pulled out the list again and read through the rules once more. They made even less sense on the third reading. What kind of research station had rules about full moons and whispers? And why would I need to count my fingers before entering a building? I spent the next few hours unpacking my meager belongings and trying to make the room feel less like a cell. Dinner in the mess hall was quiet. Only 4 other people besides Wilkins and myself, and no one seemed interested in talking to the new guy. They all had the same worn-out look as Wilkins, their eyes constantly darting to the windows despite the darkness outside. By the time I returned to my room, it was after 2100 hours. I showered quickly in the lukewarm water and got ready for bed. Tomorrow, I'd see the communications equipment and maybe get some actual work to do. Maybe then things would start making sense. I turned off the lights and got into bed, leaving the curtains open. Something about those rules made me want to keep an eye on the forest, even though I couldn't see much in the darkness. The moon was just a sliver in the sky, casting barely enough light to outline the tops of the trees. I was almost asleep when I heard it, a light tapping sound coming from the window. At first, I thought it was just branches or snow falling from the roof, but it continued, too regular to be random. Tap, 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 tap. I froze, suddenly wide awake. The sound continued, following that same strange rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. I remembered rule number 1. Remain indoors between 2200 and 600 hours. No exceptions. It was just past 2300 now. Every instinct told me to get up and look out the window. It was probably just a branch hitting the glass, or maybe one of the other staff playing it was probably just a branch hitting the glass, or maybe one of the other staff playing some kind of prank on the new guy. But something about that rhythm felt wrong, unnatural. Tap, 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 tap. It wasn't random and it wasn't mechanical. It had a deliberate quality that made the hair on my arms stand up. I sat up in bed and stared at the window. The curtains were still open and I could see the dark outline of the forest against the night sky. Nothing seemed to be moving out there. No visible source for the tapping. Tap, 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 tap. I started to swing my legs over the side of the bed, then stopped. The rules, the very first night, and I was already thinking about breaking them. What had Wilkins said? Follow them and you might make it to the end of your 6-month rotation. The way he'd said it wasn't like a joke. The tapping continued, more insistent now. Tap, 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 tap. My curiosity was killing me. I'd always been the kind of person who needed to understand things, to see problems with my own eyes. That's what made me good at my job. I fixed things by investigating them firsthand. But something about this place felt off. The rules, the way everyone avoided eye contact at dinner, the isolation. Maybe there was a good reason for those rules. I lay back down and pulled the blanket up to my chin, feeling ridiculous. Here I was, a grown man, a military specialist, hiding under my covers from a tapping noise. But I didn't get up. I didn't go to the window. The tapping continued for what felt like forever. Sometimes it would stop for a minute or two, and I'd start to relax, thinking whatever it was had gone away. Then it would start again, that same unsettling rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. Nearly an hour passed before it finally stopped for good. I lay awake in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, listening for any sound. The silence felt almost as unnerving as the tapping had been. What kind of assignment had I gotten myself into? What were they really doing at Station Echo 7 that required rules about whispers in the forest and lights in the night? And what the hell had been tapping at my window? I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I started to drift off, I'd jerk awake, convinced I'd heard the tapping again, but it was just the wind, or the building settling, or my imagination working overtime. I woke up exhausted. The red numbers on my alarm clock showed 5:15 when I dragged myself out of bed. I'd barely slept 4 hours after that weird tapping, and my body felt it. The shower helped a little. I stood under the hot water longer than usual, trying to wash away the creepy feeling that had settled over me. By 5:45, I was dressed in my uniform and heading across the frozen ground to Building 2. The cold hit me like a slap. Alaska in January wasn't messing around. My breath formed thick clouds in front of my face as I hurried between buildings, the snow crunching under my boots. The sky was still pitch black and would stay that way for hours. Building 2 was smaller than the main building but bigger than the barracks. I found the door unlocked and stepped inside, stomping snow off my boots. The interior was warmer, with fluorescent lights humming overhead. The place smelled like metal and dust. Barton, right on time. Commander Wilkins was already there, standing by a bank of radio equipment. He didn't look like he'd slept much either, but that seemed normal for him. "Sir," I said, giving him a quick salute. He nodded toward the equipment. "This is your station. Daily check-ins with headquarters at 0800 and 1600. Log everything, standard protocol." I looked over the setup. It wasn't anything fancy, just basic military-grade communications equipment, a couple of computers, and a desk with a logbook. "What's been malfunctioning, sir?" I asked, remembering what he'd mentioned yesterday. "Random outages, signal drops, interference." Wilkins handed me a clipboard with a maintenance schedule. "Run diagnostics daily, replace any faulty components. We've got spares in that cabinet." I nodded, scanning the schedule. Pretty straightforward stuff. "Sir, about last night," I said. "There was something tapping on my window, around 2300 hours. Wilkins's expression didn't change. "Did you go outside to investigate?" "No, sir. Rule 1. Remain indoors between 2200 and 600. "Good." He nodded once. "Follow the rules, Barton. That's all you need to know." "But what was it?" I pressed. "Did I not make myself clear yesterday, Specialist?" His voice hardened. "Need to know, and you don't." I swallowed my questions. "Yes, sir." "Good. Now check the satellite uplink. It's been spotty. I want a full diagnostic by 0900. He turned to leave, then stopped. "And Barton?" "Sir?" "Count your fingers." I looked down at my hands, confused, then remembered Rule 10. I counted once, then again. 10 fingers, sir." He nodded, like this was completely normal, and walked out. I spent the morning running diagnostics on the equipment. Everything seemed to be working fine, which made me wonder what had happened to the previous communications specialist. By lunchtime, I'd established contact with headquarters, logged the morning check-in, and fixed a loose connection in one of the satellite receivers. The mess hall was quiet again. The same 4 people from yesterday sat at their table, barely talking. I grabbed a tray of something that looked like beef stew and sat alone. Nobody seemed interested in the new guy, and that was fine by me. I wasn't here to make friends. After lunch, Wilkins assigned me to check the exterior communications array. That meant going outside, which meant following Rule 4, limit outdoor activity to necessary operations. I bundled up and checked my watch, 13-15 hours. I'd give myself exactly 20 minutes for the task, not 1 minute more. The array was on the roof of Building 2. I climbed the metal ladder on the side of the building, the cold making my fingers ache even through my gloves. The wind was stronger up here, cutting through my layers. I worked quickly, checking connections and tightening loose components. 18 minutes later, I was back inside. Mission accomplished. The rest of the day passed without incident. I made the afternoon check-in with headquarters, logged everything, and was dismissed at 1800. Dinner was as quiet as lunch. I ate quickly and headed back to my quarters. That night, I waited for the tapping to return, but it never came. I slept a little better. The next few days fell into a pattern. Wake up at 0545, report for duty at 0600, run diagnostics, morning check-in, lunch, maintenance tasks, afternoon check-in, dinner, back to quarters by 2100, lights out by 2200. I was careful about my time outside. I always checked my watch, giving myself strict limits. 20 minutes for exterior maintenance, 15 minutes for the walk between buildings. Never a minute more than necessary. Every night I'd pull the blackout curtains closed before going to bed. No sense tempting whatever had been tapping at my window. On my 4th day at Station Echo 7, Wilkins assigned me to do a perimeter check of the communications equipment. This meant walking the boundary where several signal boosters were positioned about 50 yards from the main buildings. I bundled up and checked my watch. 1400 hours. I'd give myself 45 minutes. The snow was about 8 inches deep, making walking a chore. I checked each signal booster methodically, clearing snow from the solar panels and making sure the connections were secure. I was at the last booster, the one closest to the tree line, when I noticed them. Footprints in the snow, heading from the forest toward the station, then curving away again. These weren't human footprints, at least not normal ones. They were elongated, almost twice the length of a regular boot print, but narrower, and the toe area was wrong. Instead of a single rounded edge, there were what looked like 6 or 7 separate toe impressions. I crouched down for a better look. The prints were fresh, maybe from this morning before the sun had fully risen. Whatever made them had been walking on 2 legs, not 4. I glanced toward the forest, suddenly aware of how quiet it was. No birds, no wind rustling the pines, just silence. My watch beeped. 30 minutes had passed. I needed to finish up and get back. I hurried through the last checks and made my way back to the station, looking over my shoulder more than once. I thought about reporting the footprints but decided against it. Wilkins had made it clear he didn't appreciate questions, and I wasn't sure what to ask anyway. That night, I dreamed of walking in the forest, following those strange footprints. I woke up sweating, despite the cold room. On my 5th day at Echo 7, I was checking the perimeter again when it happened. I was near the eastern signal booster when movement caught my eye. Someone was coming out of the forest. At first, I thought it might be one of the other personnel, though I couldn't imagine why anyone would go into the forest in the first place. But as the figure got closer, I realized it wasn't anyone from the station. It was an elderly woman. She wore what looked like a hand-knitted sweater over a long dress, completely inappropriate for the freezing temperatures. No coat, no hat, no gloves. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she carried something in her hands. I stood frozen, watching her approach. We were about 100 yards from the main buildings, and I suddenly felt very alone. "Hello, young man," she called out. Her voice sounded off somehow, too clear in the cold air, like it wasn't affected by the distance between us. I didn't respond. Rule 5 was about whispers, not old ladies, but something told me to be cautious. She came closer, smiling. That's when I noticed her face. Her smile stretched too wide, showing too many teeth. Her eyes were fixed on me and barely blinked. "I've brought you a gift," she said, holding out what looked like a small wooden box. "A welcome present. You're new here, aren't you?" Rule 3. Don't accept gifts from unrecognized people. "No thank you, ma'am," I said firmly, taking a step back. "I can't accept that." Her smile didn't waver, but something changed in her eyes. They seemed to darken. "It's just a small token," she insisted, still holding out the box. "Something to keep you warm during these cold nights." "I appreciate the offer, but I must decline," I said, my hand instinctively moving toward the sidearm I wasn't carrying. "I need to get back to the station now." She stared at me with unnerving intensity. Her head tilted slightly, almost like a bird's. "Are you sure? It gets so cold here, so lonely." "I'm sure. Good day, ma'am." I took another step back, keeping my eyes on her. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, with oddly fluid movements that didn't quite match her elderly appearance, she turned and walked back toward the forest. She never looked back, and she took the box with her. I watched until she disappeared among the trees, then hurried back to the station, checking over my shoulder every few steps. My 45 minutes weren't up, but I didn't care. I went straight to Wilkins' office and knocked. "Enter," he called. I stepped inside and closed the door. "Sir, I need to report an encounter during my perimeter check." He looked up from his paperwork, suddenly alert. "Go on." An elderly woman approached me from the forest. She offered me a gift. I refused, following Rule 3. Wilkins leaned back in his chair, studying me. Describe her. I told him everything. The inappropriate clothing, the too wide smile, the unblinking eyes, the fluid movements. When I finished, he nodded slowly. You did well, Barton. That was a test, and you passed. A test, sir? The rules exist for a reason, he said. They're not random restrictions. They're survival protocols. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. What are we dealing with here, sir? What's in those woods? Wilkins stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the forest. You've been here 5 days, Barton. You've followed the rules. You've seen things. What do you think is out there? I thought about the tapping, the strange footprints, the woman with the too wide smile. Something not human, sir. He turned to face me. Now you're starting to understand. The rules will keep you alive, Barton. Don't break them. Not ever. I'd been at Echo 7 for a week now. The daily routine was starting to feel normal, which was probably the strangest part of all. Wake up at 4545, Building 2 by SO 600, morning check-in, equipment diagnostics, lunch alone, afternoon maintenance, evening check-in, back to quarters by 2100, repeat. The tapping at my window came back on night 6, same rhythm as before, tap, 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 tap. I stayed in bed, just like the first time. Rules are rules. By night 8, I almost expected it. You adjusting to the schedule, Barton? Wilkins asked during my second Monday morning check-in. Yes, sir, I said, finishing my equipment log. No issues with the routine. Good, he nodded, checking his watch. Satellite maintenance today. South array needs realignment. I grabbed my coat. I'll take care of it. Remember, 20 minutes max outside. I know, sir. The sun hit different up here. That was the first thing I noticed during my second week. Even in January in Alaska, with daylight lasting maybe 4 or 5 hours, the sun felt wrong on my skin. Not just cold, intense, like it was burning and freezing at the same time. I'd never felt anything like it. I timed myself precisely during outdoor maintenance. 18 minutes to adjust the south array, 15 for the east, 22 for the north, which needed extra work. I always came back with red cheeks and this weird tingling feeling all over my exposed skin. Sir, is there something unusual about the sun here? I asked Wilkins after finishing the north array. He looked up from his paperwork. How do you mean? It feels different on my skin, more intense. The atmospheric conditions at this latitude can create unusual effects, he said without elaborating. Keep your exposure limited. I nodded. Yes, sir. The routine continued. Morning check-ins, diagnostics, maintenance, evening check-ins, meals in the mess hall with the same 4 silent personnel. I still didn't know their names. They still didn't talk to me. I stopped trying to make conversation after the 3rd day. During my 2nd week, Wilkins assigned me to check the perimeter sensors. I bundled up against the cold, set my watch timer for 45 minutes, and headed out. The perimeter sensors formed a rough circle about 100 yards out from the main buildings. I checked them one by one, working clockwise. Everything was normal until I reached the western sensor. That's when I heard it. My name. Just a whisper at first. Brandon. I froze. The voice came from behind me. I turned slowly, hand moving to my sidearm. Nothing there but snow and trees. Brandon. This time from my left, then my right. Brandon. Brandon. Whispers from multiple directions at once. Rule 5 flashed in my mind. If hearing whispers when alone, shoot first without attempting communication. I drew my weapon and fired 3 shots into the snow. The sound echoed across the clearing. The whispers stopped instantly. My heart pounded as I finished checking the sensor as quickly as possible and jogged back to the main building. I found Wilkins in his office. Sir, I need to report an incident, I said, still breathing hard. He looked up. What happened? Whispers, sir. At the western perimeter. They were saying my name from multiple directions. What did you do? I followed Rule 5, drew my weapon and fired 3 shots. Wilkins nodded. Good. And then? The whispers stopped. I completed the sensor check and returned immediately. He leaned back in his chair. You did exactly right, Barton. Sir, what was it? What was out there? Wilkins was quiet for a moment. Sit down. I took the chair across from him. This station isn't just a communications outpost, he said finally. We monitor a thin spot here. A thin spot, sir? between realities. He folded his hands on the desk. There are things that can slip through, things that aren't from our world. I stared at him. Are you saying? I'm saying the rules exist because we've learned what works, what keeps people alive. You did the right thing today. I nodded slowly. The woman with the box, the footprints, the tapping, they're all not human, Wilkins finished. Not from here. After that, things got worse. The window tapping became a nightly occurrence. Sometimes it would stop after a few minutes. Other nights, it would go on for hours. I learned to sleep through it. Then the scratching started, like claws against the outer walls. I'd lie in bed, listening to it move around the building. Scratch, scratch, scratch along the siding, then silence, then scratch, scratch, scratch from another spot. During the full moon of my third week, I broke my own rule. I looked out the window after dark. I couldn't help it. The scratching had been particularly bad, and I wanted to see what was causing it. I pulled back the curtain just a crack. The moonlight illuminated the clearing between my building and the forest. That's when I saw them. Figures moving between the trees. Tall, thin shapes that didn't move like humans. They swayed and bent at impossible angles. I let the curtain fall back into place and didn't look again. The next morning, I reported what I'd seen to Wilkins. You shouldn't have looked, was all he said. I know, sir. It won't happen again. My most dangerous encounter happened during my fourth week. I was walking from Building 2 to Building 3 after my evening check-in. It was dark, around 1900 hours. The path between buildings was narrow, with snowbanks piled high on either side from recent clearing. Halfway across, the whispers started again. Brandon, Brandon, all around me. Close, like something, was right next to my ear. I couldn't tell which direction they were coming from. I pulled my weapon and fired blindly. 1 shot, 2, 3. On the third shot, I heard something that wasn't an echo. A high-pitched sound, almost like a scream, but not human. Then a thud in the snow. I ran the rest of the way to Building 3 and slammed the door behind me. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely holster my weapon. Wilkins found me in the mess hall 20 minutes later. You fired your weapon, he said, sitting across from me. Yes, sir. The whispers again. But this time I think I hit something. You did. He didn't elaborate. What was it? Wilkins sighed. Most people don't make it 2 weeks here, Barton. Did you know that? They break the rules. They get curious. They follow the tracks, or take the gifts, or go out after dark to see what's making the tapping sounds. I swallowed. And what happens to them? They don't come back. He looked at me steadily. But you're different. You follow the rules. You shoot at the whispers. You're still here. For how much longer? I asked. Your rotation is 6 months. You've been here 4 weeks. I did the math in my head. 5 more months at Echo 7. 5 more months of tapping and scratching and whispers and things moving in the forest. Yes, sir, I said, because what else could I say? 5 months at Echo 7 went by faster than I thought. Not because it was easy, but because survival became my only focus. By the second month, I'd started noticing patterns in the strange things happening around the station. The tapping at my window always came after the temperature dropped. Not the normal cold of Alaska in winter, but a different kind of cold that made the air feel heavy. The first time I recognized it, I was sitting at my desk writing up maintenance logs when the room suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. Within minutes, the familiar tap, 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 tap started at my window. After that, I used the temperature drops as a warning system, giving me time to prepare mentally for another sleepless night. The gift bearers, like that old woman with the wooden box, they always showed up after strange animal calls. Not normal wolf howls or bird cries, but sounds that were almost right but wrong in ways I couldn't explain. The calls would echo through the trees for about 15 minutes, then stop completely. Within an hour, someone would emerge from the forest with something to offer. The whispers had their own tell too. Before they started, the communications equipment would go haywire. Static bursts, frequency jumps, power fluctuations. It happened enough times that I started carrying my sidearm whenever the radios acted up. You've gotten good at this, Wilkins said during my 5th month. We were in Building 2, and I'd just switched off the main array after it started picking up interference. Just paying attention, sir, I said, checking my weapon. Most don't last long enough to notice the patterns. I didn't answer. I'd learned that Wilkins rarely explained more than necessary, and asking questions usually got me nowhere. When you get back to regular duty, he continued, you'll find it hard to explain what happened here. I don't plan on trying, sir. He nodded, looking almost satisfied. Smart. During my last week at Echo 7, everything got worse. The tapping wasn't just at night anymore. It started as early as 1900 hours and wouldn't stop until sunrise. Some nights it moved from window to window like whatever was out there was trying to find a way in. I'd lie in bed, eyes open, counting the seconds between each sequence, wondering what would happen if I ever gave in and looked outside. The gift bearers got more creative too. On Monday of my final week, I was checking the eastern sensor when a little girl appeared at the forest edge. She couldn't have been more than 8, wearing a pink winter coat and holding a small basket of candy. "Would you like some?" she called, her voice carrying too clearly through the cold air. My mom made too much. I kept my hand on my sidearm. "No, thank you. You shouldn't be out here alone." She tilted her head at the exact same angle the old woman had 5 months earlier. "I'm not alone. My family's right there." She pointed into the trees, but I didn't look where she was pointing. "You need to leave," I said firmly. Her smile stretched too wide, showing teeth that seemed too numerous and sharp. "Just one piece? To remember me by?" "No, leave now." The girl's movements changed, becoming fluid and wrong as she backed into the forest. Her head stayed perfectly still while her body moved, eyes never blinking, fixed on me until she disappeared among the trees. I reported it to Wilkins immediately. "Different approach, same entity," he said. "They're getting desperate before you leave." The next day, it was a merchant selling winter gear from a small cart that hadn't left any tracks in the snow. The day after, 2 researchers in lab coats claimed they were from headquarters, sent to collect samples. They knew military protocols and jargon, but their badges were slightly wrong. The eagle emblem had too many feathers, and their eyes never moved naturally. Each time, I refused whatever they offered and watched them retreat with that same unnatural movement. By Thursday, I was exhausted from constant vigilance. But Friday was my last day, and the helicopter was scheduled to arrive at noon. I packed my few belongings that morning, folding my clothes with the same precision I'd arrived with. The room looked exactly as it had 5 months ago. Bare walls, gray blankets, window facing the forest. I'd spent countless nights staring at that window, listening to the tapping, wondering what was out there. Wilkins knocked at 1100 hours. "Come in," I called. He entered with a folder under his arm. "Your evaluation is complete, Specialist Barton." "Thank you, sir. You've maintained all equipment to standard, kept communications operational, and followed all protocols." He handed me the folder. "Sign the last page." I took it, flipping to the back where his assessment was typed out in military language that boiled down to, "Did what was required." I signed my name and handed it back. "The transport will be here in 30 minutes, he said. "Any questions before you go?" I had 1,000 questions. What exactly was out there? What were they? Why this location? What was the real purpose of Echo 7? But I'd learned enough to know some knowledge wasn't worth having. "No questions, sir," Wilkins almost smiled. "Good." At exactly noon, I heard the helicopter approaching. I shouldered my duffel bag and walked outside where Wilkins was waiting. The snow was falling lightly, and the forest seemed peaceful in the daylight. It was hard to imagine the things that moved through those trees after dark. "Congratulations, Specialist," Wilkins said as the helicopter touched down. "You've joined a very small group of people who've completed their rotation at Echo 7. Just followed the rules, sir. Most can't manage that. Curiosity gets the better of them." The helicopter's side door slid open and a crew member waved me over. I saluted Wilkins one last time. "Good luck, Barton," he said, returning the salute. I climbed aboard, and the helicopter lifted off. As we gained altitude, I looked down at Station Echo 7, 3 small buildings in a clearing, surrounded by endless forest stretching to the mountains. From above, it looked ordinary, almost peaceful. But I knew better. The forest below seemed to go on forever, dark and dense. I'd survived by following 5 simple rules and accepting that some things exist beyond normal understanding. I never looked out my window after dark. I never took the gifts. I always shot at the whispers. I never followed the tracks. I counted my fingers twice before entering any building. I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes, feeling relief wash over me for the first time in 5 months. The helicopter's vibrations hummed through my bones. I'd been clutching the folded paper in my hand for 20 minutes now, knuckles white. I smoothed it out on my knee. The creases were permanent after 5 months of folding and unfolding, checking and rechecking. 10 simple rules. The handwriting was neat but hurried, like someone had written it while trying not to think too hard about why they needed to. I read through them again. 1. Remain indoors between 2200–0600 hours. 2. Don't enter forest during full moons. 3. Don't accept gifts from unrecognized people. 4. Limit outdoor activity to necessary operations. 5. If hearing whispers when alone, shoot first without attempting communication. 6. Report dreams about the mountain immediately. 7. If electronics malfunction, return to main building. 8. Never follow animal tracks leading away from station. 9. If seeing lights in forest at night, lock door and stay quiet. 10. Count fingers twice before entering any building. The paper was worn at the edges. I'd read it so many times I didn't need to look at it anymore, but I still did. Every night before bed. Every morning when I woke up. Sometimes in the middle of the day when things got quiet and I started wondering if I was hearing things. I folded it again and put it in my breast pocket. Through the helicopter window I saw green fields replacing the endless white and dark pine. Roads, buildings, civilization. Normal things. Places where people didn't have to count their fingers before entering buildings. The pilot's voice crackled through the headset. 30 minutes to base, specialist. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. My throat felt dry. I hadn't talked much in the last few hours. Hadn't needed to. When I first arrived and Wilkins handed me that list, I thought it was some kind of hazing ritual. Some weird Alaskan outpost tradition. Maybe a test to see if I'd blindly follow strange orders. I almost laughed at Rule 10. Count your fingers twice before entering any building. Seemed stupid. Until the day I counted 11 on my right hand. I flexed my fingers now. 10, 5 on each hand. Normal, human. The pilot banked slightly, and through the window I could see small towns scattered across the landscape. Cars on highways. Normal people doing normal things who never had to fire their sidearm at whispers in the dark. I'd been at Echo 7 for 3 months before I realized I'd never seen anyone complete their rotation. People disappeared. Replacements came. No one ever talked about it. The 4 other soldiers who were there when I arrived, all gone before my 2nd month. Replaced by others who didn't last long either. No wonder Wilkins looked the way he did. Haunted. Tired. How long had he been there? How many soldiers had he watched break the rules and disappear? 10 minutes out, the pilot said. I nodded again. The base was visible now. Standard military layout. Hangars, barracks, admin buildings. Nothing special about it. Nothing to suggest it was connected to a place like Echo 7. I remembered my 4th week, when I'd hit something after firing at the whispers. The sound it made wasn't human. Wilkins never told me what it was. Just confirmed I'd hit something and that I'd done the right thing. I never asked to see the body. Never asked where they took it. Never asked why we were there, monitoring a thin spot between realities, as Wilkins had put it. I just followed the rules. The helicopter descended toward the landing pad. People moved around below, going about their business. None of them checking the trees for figures that bent at impossible angles. None of them listening for tapping at their windows. We touched down with a slight bump. The rotors slowed but kept turning. The crew chief slid the door open and gestured for me to exit. I grabbed my duffel bag, ducked my head, and stepped out onto the concrete. The air was different here. Warmer, normal, no strange weight to it. I took a deep breath and felt my lungs fill properly for the first time in months. A young lieutenant waited at the edge of the pad. He approached as I walked away from the helicopter. "Specialist Barton?" he asked. "Yes, sir." I saluted. He returned it. "I'm Lieutenant Chen. You're scheduled for debriefing at 1400 hours, followed by psych eval at 1500. Of course, they'd want to make sure Echo 7 hadn't broken me." "Yes, sir." "Report to Building C, room 214. He handed me a folder. "Your temporary quarters assignment is in here. You have 2 hours before debriefing." "Thank you, sir." He nodded and walked away. Just like that. No questions about where I'd been. No curiosity. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe nobody here knew except the ones who ran the program. I stood there for a moment, feeling the sun on my face. Normal sun, not the wrong kind that burned cold. I watched people walking between buildings, nobody counting their fingers, nobody looking over their shoulders at shadows. I started walking toward the barracks area, following the map in the folder. My boots made normal sounds on normal concrete, no strange echoes, no feeling of being followed. What would I tell them in the debriefing? The truth, I supposed, that I maintained communications equipment, that I followed protocols, that I shot at whispers in the dark and hit something that screamed in a way humans don't. Would they ask about the rules? Would they want to know about the woman with too many teeth? The child with the basket of candy? The merchant whose cart left no tracks in the snow? Would they ask about the tracks with 7 toes? Or the figures that bent wrong? Or the tapping that kept me awake for nights on end? I checked my watch. Plenty of time to shower and change before the debriefing. I wanted to wash Echo 7 off me. The smell of pine and snow and whatever else had seeped into my skin over 5 months. The barracks were standard military issue, nothing special, nothing strange. The door didn't have 3 locks. The windows didn't need blackout curtains. I put my duffel on the bed and sat down next to it. For 5 months, I'd been surrounded by things that didn't make sense. Things from somewhere else. And the military knew about it. Had known for years probably. Had set up a station right at the edge of whatever that place was and staffed it with soldiers who mostly didn't come back. I pulled out the rule sheet again, looked at it. Such simple instructions, so specific. Each one existed because someone had broken it and paid the price. Someone had gone outside after 2200 hours. Someone had entered the forest during a full moon. Someone had accepted a gift. Someone had tried to communicate with the whispers instead of shooting. Someone had followed tracks leading away from the station. I thought about Wilkins, his weathered face, the scar across his cheek, the way he looked at the forest like he was waiting for something to emerge. How long had he been there? Years? Decades? What had he seen? I remembered the first time he made me count my fingers. I'd thought it was crazy. By the end, I was counting them automatically every time I entered a room. Sometimes I'd count and get 10, then count again and get 11. Sometimes they'd be different colors. Sometimes they'd be too long or bent the wrong way. I got up and went to the small bathroom attached to my quarters. Turned on the shower. Hot water. Luxury. At Echo 7, we had 3 minutes of lukewarm water per day. Conservation measures, Wilkins had said. I stripped off my uniform and stepped under the spray. As the water ran over me, I thought about what I'd tell the psych evaluator. Probably not the whole truth. They'd think I was hallucinating, traumatized, suffering from isolation-induced psychosis. They'd put me on leave, maybe discharge me. But I wasn't crazy. I'd seen what I'd seen, heard what I'd heard. Wilkins had confirmed it. The things in the forest were real. The thin spot between realities was real. I got out of the shower and dried off, put on a clean uniform, felt almost human again, almost time for the debriefing. I gathered my thoughts, tried to organize 5 months of strangeness into something I could report without sounding insane. I patted my pocket, feeling the folded paper still there. I took it out one more time, smoothed it flat on the small desk in my quarters. 10 rules, 10 fingers. I counted mine again. Still 10. I carefully refolded the paper along its worn creases, tucked it back into my breast pocket. Some things you keep close, even when you're back in the normal world. Some lessons stay with you. I'd survived Echo 7 by following the rules without question, by accepting that there are things in this world or just outside it that don't make sense and never will, by understanding that sometimes the only thing between you and something unimaginable is a piece of paper with 10 simple instructions. I checked my watch. Time to go. I stepped outside, squinting in the normal sunlight, and headed toward Building C for my debriefing. Whatever happened next, whatever they asked me, I'd remember the most important thing I learned at Echo 7. Some rules exist for a reason.